Well, good afternoon. We appreciate you tuning in. This is going to be a quick video, maybe about 5 minutes or so. Just want to get back to the basics. I've seen a lot of people start new tanks recently and spending a lot of money, and you don't need to spend a lot of money. I've kind of been down this road myself. I brought a lot of people down the road over the years of reefing, and just to show you, if you started a new tank and this is what you're seeing, it's okay. We call it the ugly phase for a reason, and you'll notice these rocks have algae growing all over them. Even the substrate has algae growing out of it. That's fine. You're going to see this for the first month or so. When you first set up a tank and you put rocks in there, even the substrate, the crushed coral, they're going to leach out or sweat out ions. And leaching is a normal part of actually curing the rock in the salt water. So there are impurities in the rock. There are different types of ions in the rock that are going to come out, including nitrates, phosphates. Could even be some heavy metals that come out a little bit. You don't know where the rock's coming from. Even if you get rock from another tank or somebody else's tank, there's going to be living organisms that are embedded in the rock. Even if you cleaned it, even if you burned it with acid, there's going to be leaching. It can't be avoided. So when this happens for the first month or so, even 2 months of having the tank, don't worry too much about it. Just kind of accept it. Let your tank mature like it needs to. Let this stuff leach out, because if you try to cut it short, it's just going to prolong the amount of time you're going to have to deal with this. Now eventually, just to show you as this video changes, you're going to start growing coralline algae. This is the same tank, the same fish, same rocks. I added some rocks to it, of course. But about a year and a half, actually this is about 3 years later, there's coralline algae all over the rocks, on the back glass. This way, hair algae just can't grow on the rocks anymore. There's no room for it. Everything is doing great. My nitrates in this tank are generally pretty close to zero. I have to dose about 5 milliliters a day of nitrates just to maintain a good healthy tank. Let me pause that there. So all that rock leaching is done. Nitrates are now very low, and I had to dose nitrates just to keep my corals happy and healthy. So, you know, your rock's going to sweat. Don't get too crazy with that. What you really need to concentrate on, let me turn these off, are import and export. Now, when you have a new tank and you're adding fish to it, your fish themselves are going to add to the bioload of the tank. You're going to have to feed the fish. When you feed the fish, they're going to poop. This is going to add to the bioload of the tank. So as you're importing, adding fish, adding livestock, even shrimp and crabs, snails, and everything you do as a cleanup crew, even your cleanup crew is going to add to the waste product that's in the water. So as you have imports increasing and increasing, and that's what happens over time, you want to make sure that you have an export system that's getting all the gases, all the poisons, all the waste, the poop out of your tank. Now, exporting happens either directly out of the water column through gas exchange, as you see in the picture there, bubbles, and bubbles will build up in your lines. If you have an overflow, you'll see your J-pipe sometimes on the top will start to get air in it. So it'll actually diffuse right out of the water. It also comes out of your sump as water's flowing. It's expires through the top of the water, the surface water, as you're using wave pumps and stuff like that. However, mechanical filtration when you first start is very important, and those are filter socks. They could be maybe some other filter system that you're using, foam socks, and overflow. There's all kinds of ways of doing it. Also, you may have a refugium. A refugium will absorb nitrates, phosphates, and other waste product, because the algae in the refugium, the chaeto algae, will actually absorb those out and use those to grow, and then you trim your algae once a week or so, throw it out, and allow it to grow and use up that waste product. Another way is a protein skimmer. But the whole point is that in order to maintain a healthy tank and to have equilibrium that's reasonable in the tank, and this is what happens as stuff is being exported out, your equilibrium adjusts, and it adjusts. So as your nitrates and your phosphates come down, you're going to see that equilibrium adjust. As your corals are absorbing stuff like alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, the trace elements, that equilibrium adjusts. But it starts with a very healthy and balanced import-export system. That's where it all starts. If you don't have a balanced import-export system, you're going to be in a tailspin constantly and always playing catch-up and spending a lot of money. So, you know, just a heads up on that. What we're going to do is turn this off, and I want to turn on my second display and bring that up. When you first get starting out, don't get too crazy on salts. The numbers that we're shooting for are very reasonable. So if your salinity is around, 0 or 0.25, 0.24, 1.025, I usually leave the 1 out, that's a given. You're fine with the salt. That's going to keep your calcium somewhere around 400. It's going to keep your magnesium somewhere around 1350, 1400, and your alkalinity around 8 to 9. And that's basically where I keep my tank. I keep my calcium a little bit higher. Also, your nitrates, it says 5 parts per million. Mine are always 5, between 5 and 10, and phosphates are somewhere a little bit lower. When you first get started out, you don't have to go too crazy. Make sure your alkalinity is balanced. It's going to probably float around 8 to 9, maybe 10 parts per million or so. I'm sorry, DHK. So if it's floating around that DHK, you should be good to go, not to worry. Heads up on salts. Right now there's a market in all these enhanced salts and fortified salts, and the salts have trace elements in it and all this other hoopla. All that means is you're going to pay a lot of money for the salt. And the truth of the matter is, as you begin to mature in your reef tank and start adding corals, you're going to have to dose trace elements. So, excuse me, so there's no way that the salt that you're buying is going to have enough trace element in it to replace what your tank is absorbing. And you may end up spending a lot of money only to have to dose trace elements again anyway. So one thing I would recommend is getting a salt that's reasonably priced with the plan to have to dose trace elements anyway. When you look at Instant Ocean and their sea salt mix, it's usually just fine for a new tank starting out. You could use this as long as you do your water changes every week, 5-10% for the first year, even longer on your tank. Now, over time, and if you notice your alkalinity start to drop, you may want to get something like their Reef Crystals. I believe Instant Ocean is somewhere around 7 to 8 DHK, and their Reef Crystals are somewhere around 11 DHK. So it does add a little more alkalinity. It's also, the Reef Crystals are fortified with a little extra magnesium and calcium. However, again, even the major elements you're probably going to be dosing when the time comes. So spending a lot of money on salt is kind of not very advantageous. You're just going to spend money. You're not going to gain too much by spending a lot of money on salt. Just a heads up, if you ever watch Polo Reef, and they have a wonderful video, I love it. They kind of have this format like, remember the Deadliest Catch, where there's emergencies going on all over that crabbing boat out in the off of Alaska. They kind of have that video format. I love their show, so I'm glad that they put it on YouTube. But with Polo Reef, with that gigantic tank that he has, they make their own salt from table salt. So they start with just basic high quality table salt that we use ourselves in our food, and then they add what they need to do to fortify the salt for their needs. So again, living proof there that just using a good quality base salt is all you need, and buying all these fortified salts, you end up paying for something that's probably not going to give you what you want anyway. It's not likely that if you do a 5 or a 10% water change with the fortified salt, that water change is going to give you all the trace elements that you need and major elements that you need in your tank for an entire week. So it's kind of you're chasing a dream. What you really want to do is just shoot for these numbers, make sure that you're hitting them. I would buy something like Instant Ocean, not that one. I get the sea salt. This is only $40 for a 160-gallon bucket. Come on. I mean, once you have your tank set up, that'll probably last you close to 6 months, maybe longer, depending on the size of your tank, doing 5% water changes every week. When the time comes, that's when you start dosing. So eventually you may add a 2-part system. You may add either separate 3-part magnesium, calcium, and alkalinity. The 1-part systems, be careful, because again, you're going to buy a dream. You're going to buy a 1-part system like All for Reef or Ready to Reef or one of those, and find that you're going to have to dose alkalinity. You're going to have to dose trace elements. You're going to have to dose magnesium and calcium, because they're called all-in-ones, but it's not likely that every tank across the world that they're selling to has the same element requirements. So you're going to find out very quickly. Again, you might be buying a dream. Be careful with those. 3-part system and 2-part systems are probably your best bet. Kalkwasser is probably your best bet, all around financially reasonable, and just dose magnesium as you need it to add to your tank. I use Captivate when it comes to trace elements. They're excellent. I get an ICP test, I send it to them, and they send me back exactly how much trace elements of each element that I need. I buy the trace elements directly from them, They have everything that I need, and it's very reasonably affordable. For small bottles, you can get big bottles, whatever you want. And shipping is, they charge you a reasonable shipping price. I think it's usually like $4 for a whole box of their product. And once you have it, you really don't have to buy it again for quite a while. We're talking about 5 drops, 10 drops, 3 drops of some elements and trace elements. So they make it very easy, and we're going to talk about that in the next video. So when you're first starting out, remember, let me turn off the second display and turn on our old new. This is normal. Don't worry about it. Let time go by. Clean up that algae with your hands if you need to as it grows. Let the rocks sweat out. They're definitely going to dissipate different types of ions and waste product into the water. They have to leach out, so let them do what they need to do. Instead of worrying about those too much, remember your import and export is very important. Make sure that you are exporting as much as you're importing. So you're adding fish and you're feeding them. You're adding snails, crabs, shrimp, all that. You have to have an export system of filtration, whether that's chemical, mechanical, whether it's something like a refugium or maybe a skimmer. You have to export at least in balance of what you're importing to maintain that reasonable gases in the tank. Got to get those nitrates out, got to get anything that's ammonia based out, or it's going to do damage. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this. Everybody have a wonderful day. I will see you again sometime in your reef tanks. Bye-bye now.